Thanks for joining us for another episode of Already Won, a Sports Friends podcast. Each week, Coach Ben and Coach Kyle share their insights, interview special guests, and offer some extra words of wisdom. The victory is ours because we've already won.
Hello and welcome to a Sports Friends podcast. Already Won with myself, Ben Wellman, and I'm here with the Mad Dog, Kyle Epps.
I am here. I'm present and accounted for. The Olympics are going on. I've been, trying to catch up on as much as I can, but it's difficult. There's a lot of events.
So much. We go on the TV and you just press like all the buttons. You want to watch this, you want to watch that.
I want to watch the breakdancing.
That's it. It's so good to see so many sports right on there. I went to London 2012 when it was here. In
you
England.
Competed in London 2012? What event?
I didn't compete. I went as a spectator. I watched some female water polo. Oh, very aggressive in the pool. They were.
Oh my goodness!
It was good experience, and that's what it is in the Olympics. You watch sports that you wouldn't normally watch, right? Yep. But Mad Dog, we get some good guests on Already Won. We have got an Olympian.
We've got an Olympian. We don't just have elite, NBA, NFL players, top level coaches, directors, executives of sports ministry programs. We bring you Olympians. Timely because it's the Olympics. They're ongoing.
There we go. Now we've got a 6-year veteran of the Canadian national rowing team, Sarah Chaudhery, and formerly known as Sarah Bonikovsky. But her career includes incredible silver and bronze World Cup medal, 2 national championship titles, and a 4th place finish at the 2008 Olympic Games in Beijing, and also a bronze medal in 2011 at the Pan Am Games. So we're going to dive into that, and we're going to talk a bit not just about the highs and the training, but we're also going to talk about the lows, right, Mad Dog? It's important to share both of those things, right? Yeah, one thing I want to say is that, within me coaching as a football coach, soccer coach, there's a stat that says that 0.00127% of players make it to play professional, which is a staggering amount. And so there's more disappointment than there is kind of success and elite success. And Sarah's going to talk a little bit about that disappointment, even at the top level. So I think it's important for us to unpack this because within sport, there's going to be disappointment, there's going to be lows, there's going to be rejection. And part of this podcast is talking about the greater game, not just about the wins and the victories, but what podcast is called Already Won about a higher victory and how that changes our identity, how we see failure, how we see disappointments, or how we just see ourselves within that as well, and how we wrestle with all that. So let's get into it, right, Mad Dog? We've got
she's here.
Yeah, let's get her in then. This is Sarah Chaudhery. She's a paediatric occupation therapist. She is married to her husband Joe, and she has kids, and they live in the Greater Toronto area. All right, let's welcome to the podcast this week. This week's guest, Sarah Chaudhery. Sarah, welcome.
Thanks so much for having me.
Welcome. So Canada, I know they do things. I'm in the U.S. Ben's in the U.K. I know there's different, pronunciation sometimes, some different food groups, but you and I are close because Canada, U.S. But Ben may need some explanation of some of these things afterwards. But we're going to do some rapid fire questions. So just to get to know you, and the only right answer is whatever comes out of your mouth. There is no wrong answer unless you say something that Ben and I disagree with. Right,
that
Ben?
is wrong.
All right, here we go. You ready?
I'm ready.
All right. Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Dunkin' Donuts or Tim Hortons?
Tim Hortons.
There we go. See, Ben needs an explanation. Okay. The mountains or the beach for a vacation? The mountains or the beach?
Ooh, the beach.
Okay. I like that. Vacation or staycation?
Vacation, but close by.
Yeah, there we go. And the last one, potato chips. Ketchup or salt and vinegar?
Ooh, neither.
Oh, good. Is there a choice?
Ripple, lightly salted.
Okay. And in Canada, they have this ketchup-flavored potato chips, so it's only in Canada. You can't get them south of the border.
Wow. Hey, I'm looking forward to hearing more facts about this. I mean, every American tells me that Canadians are funnier, they're more fun, they're all this kind of stuff. So I know we're going to have a bit of banter and fun on this, which will be good. But Sarah, look, thank you so much for your time. We're really looking forward to dive into your life experience and different bits of ministry experience as well. But our podcast is called Already Won. What does that phrase conjure up to you? What does it mean for you?
Well, for me, I was thinking this really ties into a verse that meant a lot to me while I was competing, and it's Philippians 3:13 and 14. And it says, I do not consider that I have made it my own, but the one thing I do, forgetting what lies behind and straining forward to what lies ahead, I press on towards the goal for the upward call of in Christ Jesus. And for me, I think God did a lot of work in my life, kind of tearing down my pride. I have dealt with extreme highs and also extreme lows in sport, and in the end it's not about me, it's about Jesus and what Jesus has done for us. And so to me, already won. If I'm walking in God's path and listening to him, then he already has the victory, and then I've already won.
Love it. Got a verse in there as well. Fantastic. Now, you've obviously been, for 6 years, you were rowing for the Canadian national team. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about that. But in my research for this, I found out, I think, that you wanted to be a rock star.
What?
Right before. Yeah. So I would, yeah. So why don't you share this a little bit, like how you got into rowing, which there's a story behind it, and what happened with that?
Oh, well, good job on your research, Ben. Yes, that does go way back. When I was a teenager, I was a total music geek in high school. I was in all the different concert bands and the jazz band, and played keyboards and piano. And I really wanted to be a rock star, more than anything else. And I auditioned 2 years in a row in university for piano, and the second year I made it to the interview stage, and the dean said, why do you want to be in this program? And I said, I want to write and perform my own music. And he said, well, this isn't the program for you. And that's kind of where my music schooling kind of ended, but I was already 2 years into university. And while I was there were posters for the rowing team. And there are only 2 teams that you could join without any experience, and it was rowing or rugby. And on the rowing posters, they were looking for women between 5'7" and 6'2", and I was 6 feet tall. So that's actually how I got into rowing. And it just so happened that I went to school at the University of Victoria, which is on the west coast of Canada, in British Columbia. And their lake where they rowed at that time was also the national training center. So I had lots of exposure early on to, training with the varsity team, right alongside the national team.
So the rock star thing didn't pan out. I think we're all, maybe there could be a second career here. Kids get older, and maybe the family band could happen. I don't, there's a chance. Could be a chance. Well, share us with your journey to faith and around the story of making the national team. So as you kind of living out, kind of joining the national team, being part of a training and competing, how did your faith get involved with your life?
Yeah, well, I have to be honest that by the time I left university, I really didn't feel like I had much faith left. I had a really hard time settling into a church when I moved away from home. I did grow up in a Christian family. I had lots of church involvement. I became a Christian when I was 4 years old. But I remember going down to the beach one night, and I just felt like, God, I have nothing left. I'm ready to just kind of walk away. I don't know if this is standing there and listening to the waves. This is why I said beach over mountain. And I just felt God's presence, and I just knew that he was real and he was there, and that I couldn't walk away, even though I didn't really have any more sort of rational reasons I felt to believe, but I couldn't walk away. And I think that God really used rowing to bring me back to my faith. It was not a path that I ever would have expected for myself. I was always kind of the last one to make the cut. And my coach really pushed me to try out for the national team. And I thought I'd try, just to say that I did. And then kind of that would be it. And I'd move on to a life of surfing and snowboarding. And then when I made the team, the daily grind was so hard that it just really broke me down to really cry out to God and be like, help get me through this. And I think another interesting thing that happened was I used to read the morning paper before practice. And one day, I don't know, we got a different delivery kit or something, and it stopped coming in the morning. And I was sitting there eating my oatmeal and thinking, I've got nothing to read. And I started reading my Bible again in the morning. And then I also read The Pursuit of God by A.W. Tozer at that time. And that was really instrumental, just the daily discipline of like finally getting back into God's word. And that's when God really started to move in me again. And yeah, literally that's how hard training is. There's just, I couldn't have got through it without God's strength.
It's great to hear on that. I mean, so that poster, you obviously saw the poster, you went from that, and then obviously you've then, made the national team, and then you end up going to the Olympics. Now, tell us a little bit about the training around it, because again, in the research, I looked at, different teams, Tuckman's thing about, forming, norming, storming, performing. I can imagine, I did that at university, and I wonder what that looked like, obviously, together and stuff. Tell us a bit more about the training and kind of what that was like as things were obviously getting a lot more serious leading up to the Olympics.
Yeah, so our training schedule was extremely intense, and all sports have different cultures, that for whatever reason, the culture of rowing is, I would say, like above and beyond maybe what is even needed for the sport, but people have been doing it this way for so long that I think people are afraid to kind of, dial it back. But we would usually do a morning row that was about 2 hours long. So that would be our big row of the morning. And then we do usually weight training or core strength training in the middle of the day. And then we go back and do sprint work in the afternoon. Leading up to the Olympics, like at one point, our coach experimented with a 7-day training week. And during that time, I just remember like we just never knew what day it was. We'd only get like half a day off at a time. And I think the other thing about it that is incredibly difficult is in order to put everyone in a state of performance all the time, we race against each other all the time in small boats. So I raced at the Olympics in an 8. Oh, this is an 8 here. So 8 rowers and a coxswain. But for most of the season, you're actually in pairs, which is just 2 people, and you're racing against each other like every practice over and over and over again. And so that part psychologically was extremely difficult. Also not wanting, coaches not wanting you to ever feel comfortable or safe in your position because they always want you to be kind of fighting for that. So that's a really, I think, hard place to live for a long period of time. And I found it very challenging also in like, how do I reconcile this like go for gold at any cost with like how Jesus calls us to live our life, because it was like such a dichotomy for me. So I found those parts of sport very challenging. But I loved being on a team. I loved racing and I loved traveling and the competing part. So I think those are the parts that kept me in. And I literally give God all the credit for even giving me the results that I had when I did, because it was always, I would, get the results I needed at the time I needed. And I just have to give him the glory for that, because it's even wild just thinking back that I made it at all. Yeah, I think the one other thing that I just wanted to share was we actually didn't qualify for the Olympics until I think it was June of the Olympic year. We missed out by 1 spot the year before. So that year leading up to the Olympics was also extremely stressful, because we didn't know it was all going to come down to one race and just the top 2 boats were going to make it through. So that, to me, racing the Olympic qualifier, I think, was the most nervous I've ever been for any race. Like, it was even worse than racing the Olympics.
So, Sarah, as you continued to train and see the Olympics in sight, like you knew that you were headed to the Olympics, what was that? What did that all entail? Like, what was the road? What was the process? You said the qualifier was the stress bit. Was there a little bit of relief once you arrived in Beijing? And how did that feel with the Olympics going on right now? Is it bringing back any memories?
Yeah.
Hope no trauma, but
lots of trauma, lots of good memories, and lots of hard memories too. I feel like it's something you never get over, and I'm always surprised every Olympic cycle. as I'm seeing, my own memories coming up, like on my Facebook, and then I'm following the team as they try to qualify and progress. For us, I think one of the cool things about going through the late qualifier is exactly the people who raced in that boat then got to go to the Olympics together. So we knew at that point, like, that we were the team. And when you get to that part of, when all the racing against each other is finally over, and the forming part, and then the performing part, like, those were the moments that I lived for. I'm really excited for the team right now to get to experience a really full Olympic Games, because 3 years ago they had the COVID Olympics, and it was delayed for a whole year, and there weren't, a lot of spectators, and I think it was a very different experience for the athletes. So I'm excited for them to see Paris, and hopefully, like, get a chance to walk in the opening ceremonies and just, like, really take it all in, because it's like, for most of us, like, it's like a once in a lifetime experience. And it's I just remember walking into the Bird's Nest Stadium in Beijing and just thinking, like, I've never seen this many people in one place before. Like, you couldn't even really see the other end of the stadium. Like, it was like hazy on the other side, and like the sound, it took a while, like, to get to both sides. It was just incredible.
Oh, what an experience. I mean, yeah, can only imagine what that felt like. What about what happened in Beijing 2008? Am I right in saying you guys were in third place, and then a team came up last minute, right? So you finished fourth. What was that like, during the 2008 Olympics?
She doesn't want to relive trauma, Ben. Why are you doing this?
Okay. That's okay. We'll talk about how God's used that trauma.
There we go.
It was an extremely tight race. And I think leading up to the Olympics, because we hadn't qualified yet, we were in top shape. Like, we had to be in top shape, 6 weeks out to qualify. And then we'd done quite well. We'd won a silver medal at one of the World Cup races, silver and bronze going into the Olympics. And we were excited because like, Sports Illustrated had predicted us to win, like, a bronze medal at the games. So there's a lot of hype. And then we had a really strong both men and women's team that year, and our men were favored to win gold. So there was a lot of hype, and they were calling it Super Saturday. And we had a very strong race. And just like you said, we were in second, and then we were in third, and, like, pretty solidly in third. And then in the last 10 strokes of the race, the Dutch came charging down from lane 6, and they beat us like right on the line. And it was so close that I remember, like, we weren't really sure if we'd squeak through or not, but I think there was something like 0.76 of a second between second, third, and fourth. Everyone, I think, dealt with that in different ways. Considering we had not even qualified the year before, it was actually our best international result at a championships in 8 years, I think. I remember my teammates being up in the boathouse, and I said, does anyone want to come and watch the men's race with me? Because they raced down the course right after, and nobody would come. And walking to just the bottom, I was all by myself, right? Priority seating, I guess, standing on the dock, and I watched the men come through and win gold, just all by myself there. So definitely a lot of emotions. And I think really a critical moment in my faith was happening. My father was there, and he wrote an article that ended up getting published locally about his experience, like, being there watching the games. And it talked a lot about, like, overcoming disappointment. And I was really, really mad that he'd called it a disappointment. And I was saying, like, this was still, like, a really good result. Like, we did really well. And I remember he said to me, like, you need to share your disappointments as well as your successes. And I remember at that point just saying, this is my story to tell. Like, it's not your story. And it took another 4 years of training for the next Olympics for God to do that work in my heart, to teach me that it's not my story to tell, and it's his story. And I think if we had won a medal at the Olympics, the story that I would have shared would have been, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, and look at the success God gave me. And that would kind of be it. But because I had this resonating disappointment, and then I worked extremely hard for 4 more years, and I got cut from the team right before they went to the Olympics. And then they won a silver medal that year in London. God has given me so many opportunities to talk to people, and what they want to know is, how did you overcome that disappointment? They don't want to know, like, what was it like that time you won a silver medal at the World Cup, because they don't relate to that. And we all need to deal with disappointment in our lives. And I do think God uses that, because it does kind of never go away, but it keeps us in the right heart posture with God, and keeps our focus on the true prize, which is our calling in Christ Jesus.
For sure. I mean, I always say your tests become your testimony, but just to put it into context, like, I can't imagine the amount of hours, that you put into it and stuff. And, you said how the margins there between that, coming fourth place, and then to go through another grueling, like 4 years of training almost, and then have that disappointment. The next question is, how did God help you through that? Now, you've alluded to a little bit of it, but, for those people who have faced major disappointment within sport and stuff, tell us a little bit about how that work that God did it in your heart in that time.
Yeah. And I'll just say, like, before I go into that I think for those of us who are in sports ministry, this is really important to remember, that the majority of people don't make it. And I think we can get really focused on, like, how are we going to serve, the big stars, but the people who are realizing their real need for God are going through big hurts and disappointments, and they're like hitting their rock bottom. And sports they're not God-centered, right? Like, it is, to do it and do it well, like, you have to put everything aside and just focus on that one thing. So I would say, in terms of how God helped me overcome that disappointment, it was just showing me again and again, like, it's not about you. And I had a real, I'll use the phrase TSN turning point, I think, in my rowing career, where I was in school for occupational therapy again. So I was training on a different schedule from the team. I'd had a really important relationship in my life, like, totally dissolve. And I was out training by myself, and I just was in such a low place. It was the first year I hadn't made the national team, like, for the summer competing team. And I was just crying, and I had to come up to the boathouse, and all the other girls were just meeting, like, they're having their morning meeting. They were getting ready to go in the water. And I just had to walk past them all crying, put my boat on the rack, and I went to the change room. And I was like, God, like, I'm done. I'm ready. I'm totally ready to be finished. And if this is what I'm supposed to be doing, like, you show me a sign. And I looked down, and under a bunch of bags in the change room, there was a poster, and it had a marathon runner, like, with her eyes to the sky, and it was raining. And at the top of the poster, it says, "Never, never quit." And I was like, oh, okay, God, like, haha. And then I pulled the bags down, and on the bottom of the poster, it had that verse, Philippians 3:14, and it said, "Forgetting what lies behind, I press on towards the goal to win the prize of the upward calling of Christ." And I just couldn't believe it. And I just said, okay, God, like, I'm in. I will just keep training until it's absolutely done. And that's what happened. And God used me in a completely different way. He kept me in right till the end. And I think one of the hardest things I've ever done is, when I got the final results, we did a final round of racing, and I lost over 2 races. I lost by, I think it was like 2.5 seconds to somebody else. And at that point, like, it was over. I wasn't going to have a chance. And they asked me to stay and train, like, with the B team, and to encourage, like, the next group of rowers. So here's someone who's just been, like, cut from the team, is having a season that's going, like, downhill instead of uphill, and has been berated by her coaches for, not being aggressive enough and letting people on the water first. And then now that same coach was coming to me saying, like, we really like your attitude. Will you stay? And so we trained alongside the Olympic team. And I think having 2 boats that were really fast really, like, helped that team to then go on and win their silver medal, because, having that much depth in the team was amazing that year. But that was a really, really hard thing for me. And there'd also been a big Christian television station in Canada that had wanted to do an interview with me, and I'd said to them, like, I don't know if I'm going to make the team this year. Like, I don't think you want to talk to me about this. Like, and I remember they emailed me and said, whatever happens, like, we still want to hear your story. We still think it'll make a difference. And at that point, God was showing me, I thought I needed this platform. You know, I thought, well, once I win a gold medal, then people are going to listen to me and then I'll point them to God. But it had this extra step involving me doing this big, great thing and then giving the glory to God. And God was just saying to me, like, I don't care about your platform. I don't care. Like, that's not what it's about. And so I have had a very, I think, succinct message to share, that it's, you know, not about me, and it is, like, it's about the gospel. And God has given me so many open doors post Olympics and post not making the Olympic team. I had more opportunities in that 4 years I wasn't on the team, and it just seems to continue. So I just try to take those opportunities and understand that that's a gift from God too, to be involved in ministry at any level, and take that opportunity to share what God's done in my life.
That's great. I mean, so it's you've showed us different lessons you've learned in your disappointments, and how what you thought was your own sort of, not say guilt, but shame, or whatever you want to call it, but God turned it into something else. So since the 2012 and you're retiring, what have you been doing with sports ministry? Have you been on the television in Canada telling your testimony every week?
I've had great opportunities, often, like in each Olympiad, to share that right out of sport. I retired in 2012, and I started in ministry with Scripture Union Canada at that time, and they had asked me to start up what we called More Than Gold, which was an ecumenical outreach geared towards the 2015 Pan Am Games that were coming to Toronto. And it was just such a cool opportunity because I was still really connected with the sports world, and was still getting a lot of invites, like as a recently retired athlete, to things. So that was really cool to get to work alongside a little bit with, like, the official organizing committee. And then over 3 years leading up to the game, I worked in a capacity where I was kind of pumping up the Pan Am Games as a kind of athlete spokesperson when I was asked to, and then also touring around and getting different churches involved and encouraging them to consider using sports ministry as a way to connect with their communities. So we ended up having 12 different service teams, different areas like festivals, mission teams, serving water with the Salvation Army, hosting athlete families that were coming in for the games. So we had all these different service teams. We had over 400 volunteers in the end. 300 churches were involved from 17 different denominations, and 30 other organizations participating in outreach during the game. So that was a really amazing and a lot of hard work, but it was so cool to, I think, get to work with all these different people of all these different denominations also. So that was a really exciting time. And then after that, I ended up having the opportunity to pursue occupational therapy full time, and I've been working as an OT in pediatrics ever since. And then I came to FCA last year when I was asked to speak at an event, and I got involved with FCA Canada. Maybe I think it was about 5 years ago now, and then last year we did our first all ability sports camp. Wow,
that's great. So you get everyone who's watching via video, check it out on YouTube or Facebook or X if you haven't. If you're watching on audio, listening on audio, sorry. But yeah, your current role now, Sarah, is Director of All Ability Sports for FCA. So tell us a little bit about that. What does that look like? How do you manage to balance that around your OT work and stuff? And then any stories and testimonies, kind of around it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, what really makes my heart tick is kids and youth with disabilities. I think I've always kind of been this way. I grew up with a friend with quite profound autism, who really shaped and influenced my life. And also a boy with Down syndrome that was one of my first jobs as a young teen, was being his one-on-one support person. So those two people have had really big impacts on my life that just kind of drove me to pursue working with kids and families with disabilities. So I'm really privileged to get to do that in my everyday work. And then in the last few years, Fellowship of Christian Athletes as an international organization has really felt kind of the pull of God towards, okay, we're ministering to people through sport, but who gets left out of sport? And it's people with disabilities in a huge range. Like, we know sports are not great at being inclusive. And I personally am very passionate because I know all the benefits, sport and being active has given me in my life. And for the kids that I work with on a, clinical level, I know how important activity is. Yet at the same time, these kids often can't participate in the typical camp, or their needs are too great for them to do that. And it's a huge challenge for their families to find activities that they can do that will give them kind of options to try sport on a very modified level. So I was privileged last year when FCA Canada approached me and said, like, we'd really like to try an all ability sports camp. Like, would you kind of coach us through that and lead that? And so last year was our first year trying that. We had 18 children and youth come out to camp. It was a full week camp. I think it was also the first time FCA had done like a week of camp like that, but I felt very strongly that was the best way to serve families versus more of like a one day event. It was really incredible. It was a lot of work. We did a lot of learning. Really amazing to hear the feedback afterwards from the families, and how I think we saw fruit in different ways than we'd ever even anticipated from camp. It really was more of a family ministry to families than just the kids themselves. Something that one of the moms wrote to me after camp, which really touched my heart. And I've just really used this anytime I have the opportunity to encourage people to start a ministry like this. But she said, my son was never successful at camp before. They didn't understand him and he did not like it there. This camp showed me that my son can be successful in the right environment and with the right people. It was a reminder to me that kids like mine just need understanding and to know what he needs to feel safe. And once he feels this, he can participate. Parents like me sometimes feel like the problem is our child, that our child is broken in some way and they don't fit in at school or at camp. And thankfully, I don't buy into that notion anymore because of our experiences with your camp. So to me, that was just like amazing to hear. I would encourage anyone who's thinking about doing a camp or an event or reaching out to this community that really the key to being successful is just how flexible you can be. We're excited to see what God will do this year with that.
That's great. I mean, it's always difficult to motivate yourself to get involved, but then you have your leaders, your volunteers, and you're working with people. So maybe the last question we'll ask is, what tool would you give? Like, a lot of our audience would probably be coaches. We train coaches to use the tool of sports to go into communities, like if it's all abilities, or if it's girls, or if it's boys or young children. So what kind of tools would you, practical tools could you give any of our audience listeners that are doing sports ministry? There's
a few that I've been involved with creating. With FCA Canada and FCA International, the All Ability Sports Pillar, as we call it, is a very new one in the last, I'd say, 5 years. So we're still working on getting the training that we've developed out there. So we had a major training event in Canada in April of this year, and we're working to release the video from it to be a training resource. A few others I've been involved with. There's a free resource through the International Sports Coalition that's called Kids Games for the Big Games. And this is one that I wrote with a small team back leading up to the Pan Am Games. So it explores both Paralympic and Olympic sports and has lots of ideas on how to kind of structure a day and also has like the Bible theme times and all the activities and how to adapt them for kids with different abilities. So that's a free resource. As well, for you Canadians, we have the Canadian Sports Movement that's on Facebook, and they link to a lot of resources that are available in Canada and hopefully globally. Scripture Union has the School of Kidsmen through their SU Canada website, and there are videos that I've done there that talk about how to include kids with disabilities in your ministries. And then finally, we have another organization that's called Plan to Protect that is heavily focused on child protection. But I also serve as the disability coordinator for that organization. And there are also lots of webinars that we've done there. But I always encourage people, like, your number one, even as a clinician, I see a child on paper and I get nervous when I see XYZ listed out and, oh, what's this kid going to be like? And this is going to be hard. And then when I meet that kid, they're so funny and, you know, they have all these unique things about them. And I realized I just needed to get to know them a little bit. And then I can figure out together, like, what they need to be successful. But always encourage people, talk to the parents if you can, like, use the parents as your ally and get to know as much as you can from the parents first. About what calms their child down and what they think they will need to be successful. And it doesn't have to be this big, scary thing, but that's kind of my number one tip that I always encourage people to start with, like, start with the conversation, come in from a position of humility that, you know, the parents are the expert in their child, or, you know, if you're working with older people, they are the expert in their own care and what their needs are. And start with a conversation and then take it from there.
Really good, really good. I love how you said, you know, you need the right people and to create that safe environment. And yeah, I think of many like young people that we've worked with who, like you say, incredibly unique. And once you get that relationship, and I love that, using the parents as allies and stuff. And yeah, working with it. So loads of really good practical things there, I think, around it as well, which is great. Like your whole story, Sarah, thanks so much for sharing. You know, I really just love how God's used your experience, your amazing, you know, you've had some amazing success in rowing, but then, you know, we talk about already won, the greater victory that we all celebrate. And when we know that, how it changes everything. Now you ended up doing, you know, work more than gold, which is, I know it will be more rewarding, fulfilling than whatever disappointment you faced in that way. And this is something that will have eternal significance, right? And that's what I think you sharing that stuff and those resources that you've helped create and stuff. Yeah, I think people can go and find those. But just appreciate you sharing that story. It's a very powerful testimony. Yeah, really appreciate it. And looking forward to continue to stay in touch via Charles and you and all the good things that's happening in Canada.
Yes, I would love it if people can pray for our camps too. So they'll be happening right at the end of the Olympics. So August 6th to 9th and then August 19th to 23rd. If you can pray for Canada and our all ability camps, that would be amazing.
Fantastic.
Good stuff, Ben.
Yeah, no, it was really good stuff. I mean, I just loved how, you know, her tests become a testimony. You know, Wildman's weekly word, we're going to drop it in early. Today's pain is tomorrow's power. Today's pain is tomorrow's power. And
you caught everyone by surprise.
I'm just dropping it in. I know you get used to it now. So yeah, I that story, you know, really powerful about that. You know, the disappointment of becoming fourth, not medaling, but then also 4 years later. I can't even imagine. Do you know any rowers, Maddox? I knew a rower in Newcastle. The training schedule, I'm not joking, early in the morning is relentless. And to do that like day in, day out, I can't even imagine what that would have been like to then be cut right at the very end. But she knew that like God did a work in her, which is something that even now, looking at 2024, how rich that is. Like, she's not talking from a book. She is talking from personal experience, and you can see how much that deepened her own faith and walk with God, right? So, yeah, what was it for you that you were touched by?
Well, I mean, I just even liked her. You know, it wasn't a dream of her to row for Team Canada. It wasn't like an aspiration from when she was a small child. It was, she saw an advert. It was either rugby or rowing. I mean, it was incredible how God used that rowing. And look, today, her testimony is still going forward. She's doing these all-ability camps. She's speaking to us. She's doing things all over the place. And it's not, again, she said, it's not about her. It's about God using her and performing her abilities through her.
Yeah, so good. I mean, in the world of sports, friends, if we're going to link what she was saying, you know, we have done some all ability camps, right? You know, we're going to see a video now from our guys in Kenya who've done one. But just talk before we do that, what about the stigma around it? Because we work in, obviously, in African context and stuff and other places where if someone has some sort of disability or anything like that, often they just get left to the side, right? And they just get like completely forgotten about. So, yeah.
I mean, even so, if someone has a physical disability, it's obvious. You can see that, and they're always left behind, left out, not even included. But if they have something you can't see, maybe it's a mental health issue or it's something else. Even those are more difficult. But if you include people, if you get to know people, as she said, you may see a list of things on a piece of paper, but that's not the person till you get to know them, talk to them, see them through. We had a mom in Joss send her son to the camp. She kept bringing her son by our offices trying to figure out what to do. How can she involve her son? Her son needs something to do. Went to one of our camps for 4 days. Came back, had the time of his life. He was never allowed to play on the pitch. He was the goalkeeper. And now she continues to keep encouraged through that. So I think those kind of things, just including people, is getting to know them, getting to understand them.
Yeah, for sure. She said get to know the parents, get them as allies. And like you say, some things around autism or like even ADHD or something. She said kids are unique. Get to know them as a special young person and getting the right people, So if, we're doing camps and stuff, don't see it as a problem, but see it as a blessing, right? So, yeah, some really good things. So we see the video then from a Sports Friends field, and let's see what it looks like within a Sports Friends context.
The way they look, they don't appreciate the way she is.
In our community, children with disabilities live in unbelievable poverty and isolation. They are hidden in the back bedrooms by their families who believe it's a curse. We are reaching out to the hidden and forgotten in our community who are at our doorstep, who are least reached with the gospel. Sports Friends Kenya is hosting a camp for families with disabilities, and it is a once-in-a-lifetime experience to these families. Children get loved all day long by our coaches. They have time to play, they have arts and crafts, and they can enjoy at 3 square meals in a day. All the parents are attending a week trauma healing session.
Good video. Good stuff to be reminded of. Yeah.
For sure. Always good to see what it's like on a Sports Friends field like that and get a real picture with a video as well. So it's worth watching on the video, Mad Dog, isn't it? But what do people have to do other than go on YouTube and watch the video? What do they got to do?
I think there's always the case of people, they don't tell their friends, but they need to. And they should tell their friends' friends. But then, your parents, give them a call right now. Give them a call. Pick up your phone, call your parents, tell them and their friends, the parents' friends, that they love.
Thanks again for joining us on Already Won, a Sports Friends podcast. Please like, share, and subscribe on your favorite streaming platform.